making a difference. And that certainly came through, for example, in our last CQC report. So I'm really pleased to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So enjoy, and thank you as always for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much, Anne. And again, I could just only echo what Anne just said. It's just fantastic. So, Bryony, could we move on the slides then? Because I'll do the quick intro to the slides. So everyone hopefully is familiar with our strategic direction slide. And of course, it's right in the center of our 5 domains there is creating an improvement culture. So we really do hope that our sessions here today help that by sharing learning. And always, I think, a really positive tone from what everyone picks up. Next slide, Bryony, please. So we're all aware of people first practice, how we share ideas, principally around three important principles: a real respect for staff and involving them, really valuing what we do with patients and at the centre of it, and enabling teams to make improvements. So next slide, please, Bryony. And hopefully what you'll see in some of the presentations today is some really important pillars to the practice. Clear purpose, people using PDSA, having clear metrics, huddles binding things together and making teams work. And although we did this last time, a lot of our teams now are using our team health part of our huddle. And just as a bit of a commercial break, we've now got 5 external organisations interested in picking up the same tool as part of their huddles, including one of the leading VMI trusts, which is really great. Always does your ego good when you know you're doing something right. And it's really great that the teams are really getting some benefit from it, so which is fantastic. Next slide, please, Bryony. So today we've had to trim down report out, so we've unfortunately lost the theatre presentation. Tara is going to kick us off in a minute, but before we go to Tara, you'll notice that next month's report out is already packed, and we might have to do something about them. I think we're going to have quite a few more improvements as well, so we might have to think about that. There is a group working on histopathology flow, so all our slide and specimen production, and I don't know if Neil's able to do this, but we were going to say a quick hello to the team before we went into the report out. So this was your cue, Neil, to do. We're going to see if this works.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah. Microphone's on. So yes. Hello. I'm Bruce Gray from the Vital Signs team, which is part of NHS England, and I've had the pleasure this week of working with a few of the histopathologists. There we go.
So I think I'm looking at the bottom bookmark there and seeing Bruce around. I hope people can see him. So Bruce is down in the meeting room. Go on then, Bruce.
Yeah, and so we've gone through sort of classic process improvement process, which is map the problem, use data boxes, look for opportunities, look for frustrations, understand the problems, and then go into root cause. Thanks, I'm just waving this thing around. Go into root cause analysis and use 5 whys, and we're just starting to do a little bit of plan, do, study, act stuff that then the local team, after I've gone and come back in 3 weeks' time, will be able to kind of work with the histopathology team. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure and a learning experience for me as well. But yeah, I want to get back to it now, so thank you.
So Bruce, can I just ask who's in the room?
Louise Spears, Technical Service Lead.
Hi, Lou.
Hi, I'm Roxanne Austin. I'm Special Procedures Lead BMS.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Dan Lane. I'm a Specialist Biomedical Scientist.
And I'm Ilona, Assistant Biomedical Scientist.
Thank you. Oh,
hi,
and we got
the Pathology Improvement Lead.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Neil, for making that happen. I did think it was quite nice that knowing they're working downstairs and Bruce has come all the way down from Coventry to help us, to give him a quick mention. So thank you very much, Neil. I think you can turn the camera off now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that, everybody, but we just wanted to give them, as they're working so hard at it, and it's a really difficult area to work through. So we know it's really, really important, but they're up for the challenge and making some really good suggestions, which is fantastic. So I think we're now going to go into, I hope, Tara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tara.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tara. I'm a BMS in Immunology and I've worked for the Trust for 19 years now. Next slide, please. So we are a relatively small team and we started with quite a basic huddle that has grown in size over the last 12 months. Initially, we wasn't really on board with the idea, but after some internal issues, the benefits become quite clear. Next slide, please. So my recent new manager, Rob Archer, put me in touch with Kay Sharp, who has helped us with evolving our huddle into using a team improvement board. And this has enabled me to communicate my CATA projects and also develop team health within the section. And it's been a lot of fun establishing the lab team values, and each day we have open discussions, honest discussions around them. And this is important to me to invest in the emotional well-being of everyone. And I'm a firm believer in good communication to keep teams together and strong. I think it's important to empower people so they don't leave the trust and take the time to listen to them. It takes a long time to get people trained in the labs, and I don't want to lose that skill. Next slide, please. So this particular service improvement journey started last year with Mike Biscombe and a new CATA project. So this was intended to be a relatively small project that has turned into a much bigger one. So the original CATA project was to eliminate the use of duplicate lab numbers, but from that it became apparent that of the 42 tests we send away to specialist reference labs, it is a system full of waste that has traditionally not been looked at. For example, we have to wait for the reports to come back from the lab in the post, then input results, and then they have to be checked before authorising. So my CATA project led on to getting all send away tests onto MPEX, not just the ones identified on my storyboard as the long waiters. Basically, MPEX is a digital exchange designed to connect all pathology laboratories in the UK and cuts out relying on the post, inputting results, transcription errors. This step alone will save 7 to 10 days turnaround time on each test. Next slide, please. So I have weekly meetings with Rebecca George, which is essential to keep this project going. It is at times frustrating and hard work, but the payoff is significant. And as you can see from my staff projections. So what people may not realise is immunology process work for Trellis, Torbay and Exeter hospitals. And they bring a significant amount of money to combined labs. And it is important to show them we are always looking at ways to improve this process and do this by reducing turnaround time with no extra expenditure. So I've always just got on with this side of my job, but now I present the work on the board to the rest of the lab daily. And this not only makes everyone feel involved and informed, but I also get suggestions for improvement or ideas when I'm encountering problems myself. And immunology is also split up into different sections, and we have so many outstanding projects around with my band sixes, and sometimes it's hard to manage and engage them at times. So my next step of the board journey is to get them to present their work once a week using the 8-step procedure. And this will get them appreciation of their work, any extra help needed, and improved communication with sometimes frustrated clinical team. And I'm hoping this will move along outstanding projects for those sections. Anytime they will be CATA trained, but in the interim, this will get them involved in project management, get them to think about waste in their process and address outstanding work. Next slide, please. So we have recently got all routine work onto MPEX for Trellis Hospital. And previously, all this work was handwritten. The lab had to manually interpret sheets of tests and booking samples. And not only did this take up a lot of time, it was open to error, resulting in incorrect tests being done on patients. I have spent a lot of time going through outstanding lists and correcting mistakes, and patients have had to be rebled for the correct testing, and MPEX stops all of this. So I would just like to end by thanking all the service improvement team for their patience and support with me. But this, alongside my CATA training, has been immensely beneficial to the lab. Thank you.
Tara, can I just say a huge thank you to you for a couple of things. One is obviously the ongoing work, which is amazing, but that was pretty much a masterclass in how to talk to detail on slides. So really, really well done. Absolutely fantastic. And you were nervous about this, but
very.
What a professional is all I'd say. I guess I've got one question, and maybe if Anne's still on, she might have a question for you as well. I don't know. But how important has it been, the structure of both the improvement huddle and the CATA storyboard? Is it how much has it helped you?
Oh, immensely. I mean, our huddles were good, but they were long and they weren't as structured, and I didn't really feed back with my CATA work, so the lab wasn't really involved, and I was just getting on with things without involving the whole lab, and that just doesn't work, and it's sped it along now, and yeah, communication and it's made the actual huddle a lot more condensed. but more structured.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Anne, if you got while you're on here, have you got any questions for Tara?
Yeah, I have. Thank you. Hi, Tara. How are you doing?
Hello.
Thought that was
Nervous.
great, actually, really good. And I thought the way you went through the presentation, as Richard said, really, really brilliant. Really interested. I think you said something that you know, you weren't, it was a bit difficult to get some of your colleagues involved, but once you were able to do that, the project really flew. What did you do to encourage people to engage? Because that's really important, isn't it, in terms of leadership?
Well, it's been a difficult journey, but it's been support really from everybody. There's been so many parts of the team, you know, Mike Biscombe, Kay Sharp, Richard, Rebecca, because obviously Mike had to go away for the Lighthouse project. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Rob's been a turning point for me as well. He's sort of introduced me to people, but it's been the support and persistence of them and myself with the team, and team health, I think, has been a big thing for us. I think it's really, really beneficial for the lab, and it's something that I'm really proud of.
And when you look back, what could have helped you more?
I suppose access to everyone really. It's now I know this fantastic team. It's, you know,
Yeah.
and the weekly meetings for me. I have weekly meetings with Kay, Lynn, Rebecca, and that pushes me to improve. And I've just had immense support of everybody on the service improvement team.
Brilliant. That's really great. Thank you. Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tara, and thanks for the commercial break there as well. That was really good. I'm sure a lot of this is obviously down to your personal coaching of your team, which I think is absolutely amazing, and the support of Rob. So well
Yes.
done to Pathology.
Thank you.
So Bryony, who's next up? All right, so Kate, you're away. Have I taken
Hi,
Kate by
thanks,
surprise
Richard.
there? Go on.
Yeah, so I'm one of the radiation protection advisors for the Trust and sit within clinical and radiation physics. And we picked up a project around our dosimetry return. So these are monitors that we send out to all workers working with ionising radiation within the Trust. So we've got a lot of them. That's around 500 staff. And then we issue around 6,000 badges because staff will sometimes wear more than one. So you can see in the pictures there, we've got a body badge is the purple one, and then the kind of circular band is an eye band. So they'll wear that on top of their heads to monitor their eye doses, and then the bottom two are fingers, and depending on the work they're doing, they'll either wear the one on the left or the one on the right. And so it covers a lot of different areas. So there is imaging, but there's also cardiology, radiotherapy. So we're kind of talking about different service lines and care groups that we need to tap into. Now, what we were finding, can I have the next slide, please? What we were finding were that we had a feeling as a dosimetry service that last year the badges weren't seemingly coming back, or weren't coming back at the same kind of rate that we were expecting them to come back at. But we also then realised that we didn't really have any kind of management system in place to quantify that and to track it and to try and feed back to people when things weren't being returned to us. And so the consequences of these not coming back to us are we're missing information about what people's radiation exposure is, which for me as a radiation protection advisor makes my job harder for providing assurance to the Trust that we're appropriately looking after our staff. And secondly, if the regulator taps into the fact that we're not managing this as well as we could be, there could be consequences in that for the Trust in terms of notice of contravention or prohibition that might even stop our work with ionising radiation. So that impact on the patient there can be quite significant. And it just in general, it's around the culture. So if you can see that you've got kind of good management of this side of things, it just gives an indication that your radiation safety culture is good within the organisation. And so there's a financial impact. So every badge that we lose, that's £24 that we get charged. And when we started looking at it last year, we realised we had around £10,000 worth just not accounted for that hadn't come back to us. So that's missing data and money that it's costing us. And normally that's around £2,000 when we had a look back. So we decided to focus on radiology, mainly because they were highest number of staff and it was the body badges not coming back to us, but kind of keeping in mind that we knew there were different areas that worked slightly differently. So this project was focused on that, but was probably going to identify how we might do things in the future as well with the other areas. So true graphs there, you can just see that dosimetry is on the up in terms of numbers of monitors. So I think at the beginning I said 6,000. I think we're on track for 7,000 this year so far. And then on the right hand side, you can see kind of numbers of lost. And whilst it's not a great amount, given the amount of badges we issue, there's clearly was a step change in 2020 that occurred. Next slide, please. So we had a little look at what was going on. We think from a COVID perspective, part of it may have been more staff working from home. So these badges have gone home with them. They might be issued to them, picking them up, taking them home, and them just not coming back to us. Last minute COVID isolation, so if people are not able to come in or they're having to self-isolate because of their own health reasons, not being able to come in. We also found that a lot of the systems in place for dosimetry returns were single point failures. So it relied upon one member of staff, and that member of staff was often clinical. They often had minimal amount of admin time, and also that admin time was, say, 1 day a month. Now these badges need to come back to us in a timely fashion, so that's not necessarily the right way to resource it. And there was also lack of ownership of the individual. So there is kind of a legal requirement for every individual that's issued these badges to take it upon themselves to ensure they're promptly returned. So we wanted to try and just share the load a bit, really, rather than putting it on one member of staff, trying to train people, get the awareness out there, encourage that to improve. Next slide, please. So when we looked at it, we found that the locations sometimes weren't ideal for people, so we wanted to make it easier. So we put in more return points so that people could return their badges themselves, and they were just kind of collated at the end, which sounds really simple, but because we hadn't looked at it, we just hadn't put it into place. Raised awareness, so just attending various meetings, CME days, just from us, just to brief people on why it's important. But I think you join the trust, and then 10 years later you're still getting these badges, and you've probably forgotten why it's important and why they want to come back to us. And then visual management. So we've implemented a KPI now that we issue out to everybody each month that just looks at the rate of return. So we're aiming for 90% back to us within 14 days. And most areas have got there now, and they seem to quite like having a metric and having a target. And I don't know if competition is there yet. I think it's there probably between some areas. But we're still, and then we've also got in a target there for lost dosimetry. So overall in the year, we don't want more than 1.5%. So we're now tracking that as we go, rather than just waiting for our bill at the end of the financial year, keeping on top of it ahead, which is more helpful. And then, yeah, for future work, so we're having a look at the Peninsula Academy. So we have registrars that work across the peninsula, so Torbay, Taunton, Derriford, and that's where we've got a really poor return rate of dosimetry. And we think it's to do with location and the fact that it involves lots of different systems. So we're going to see what we can do to improve upon that. And then interventional radiology and cardiology. So our high dose workers, they haven't yet met their return within 14-day KPI. So I'm meeting with them to look at that. I think part of it is because they have kind of floating staff, so say anaesthetists that will come with them some days and then go off to other centres and work in theatres. They struggle with that because they can't quite manage that staff within their normal kind of huddles and things. So yeah, that was it.
So Kate, fantastically well done. This is obviously your practice coach certification. We'll go on to the certificate in a minute, but I just want to maybe leave Anne the first question. Actually, I'll do a follow-up one. If you're okay with that, Anne, you jump straight in.
Yeah, don't mind. Thank you, Kate. Thank you again. I thought that was a great presentation and a masterclass in how to present, because actually somebody who doesn't know very much about this, feel really up to speed about it, could talk about it now. So really, really brilliant. And what I really liked, so it's feedback rather than a question, Richard, is I really like the fact that the driver for this was about safety. And it just so happens that we can save money as well. And I think that's brilliant. Really great. And well done.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I do have to ask a question though, Kate, 'cause I always do on the practice coach. So how is using the training and the tools that you've been given or helped with, how has that helped you deliver this?
Yeah, really helpful. So I think certainly the visual management aspect of it, I think when I came back to our department and the areas that we work in, just is then very obviously apparent that there's nothing going on to show people. I think doing the PDSAs was helpful for looking at making changes and seeing what's going to happen and what does actually happen, and then feeding that back into the system. I think in terms of just communicating and working with people and setting up a huddle, if you like, so it's a Teams version of a huddle, but we have now got a weekly dosimetry meeting that we have that involves the other kind of people involved that are clinical but in other service lines have an opportunity to meet with us and talk with us. We used to just be an email inbox, and now there's kind of faces of us that go alongside that, which I think has really helped. So yeah, it just focused the mind. I think having the training, having a bit of time out of normal work to just focus on this sort of stuff, to then take it back with you kind of fresh in your head to work on it within the teams.
So well done, Kate. I'm not going to open up to other questions. None have appeared, but by the way, to the audience, if you do want to ask questions, please put them in the chat. Your certificate's there and it will get given to you properly. So really, really well done. We're going to move on, but congratulations, Kate. You're the first of today's 3 practice coaches, which is our bumper day today. So I'd like to move on now, and I think this is a really special presentation, the next one. So can we have next slide, Bryony? So we framed this a bit differently. Kate, bless her, had some really difficult arrangements. So we've had to stream her with a roving reporter. So Kerry Killeen has pre-recorded Kate's presentation on the slides here. So if this all works, Bryony, I hope you're not panicking too much. I think we're going to go straight into Kate Hocking's presentation.
Hello everyone, so this is the update for the report out from Imaging this month, and coming from Imaging this month we have Kate Hocking, so I will let Kate introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name's Kate. I'm the Deputy Lead CT Radiographer. I'm here to talk to you about my improvement project.
So Kate, I think the best place for us to start would be if you could just give us just a really brief overview of why you arrived at this project. So what was going on in the department, working as a radiographer yourself, seeing the kind of problems that you and your team were encountering each day.
Yep, so we had a lot of downtime in the inpatient CT scanners, and when we looked at it, it was because porters were going to the ward to collect patients, but the patients weren't ready. So we decided to do some data collection to see if we could improve our throughput through the scanners by looking at ward readiness. So we collected some data to find out like the main reasons for the delays and also what was the most common delay. And we found that patients not being ready for the scan was mainly to do with the not having an appropriate cannula sited or a cannula sited at all. Patients having a meal and not being allowed off the ward, and no escort being ready, no escort being available to bring the patient down to CT.
So how did you collect this data? Was it something you got yourself? Did you use another member of the team? Was it the porters?
Yeah, so everybody contributed to collecting this data, including the CT coordinator and the porters. It was a joint effort from everybody trying to work out. We did it manually. So yeah, everyone took part, porters, CT radiographers and the CT coordinator.
And so these areas that you've selected for your improvement, was that naturally because they were the kind of repeat offending areas, if you like, that you sort of identified peaks?
Yeah, so they were the peaks of the most common reasons, and also we chose no cannula patient having a meal and no escort to look at because we thought we could influence those from CT. We could help the wards with that. Influencing those areas, we had a bit of control over those.
Fab. So moving on to your next slide then, do you want to tell us exactly how you started to tackle this improvement and your methodology for solving it?
Yep, so we used the CATA methodology. So we identified we needed a way to tell the wards when the patient was going to be scanned and what the wards needed to do to get them ready. So we identified that Salus was being used across the hospital in all the wards for lots of other things around care happening to the patients, and their wards are already familiar with it. So we worked with IT to create a CT attribute so the ward knew the timescale of the scan, and a cannula attribute so the wards knew what was required to get them ready for the CT scan.
And when you were developing this, were there any kind of particular problems or stumbling blocks that you had to find new ways of working around, or was it quite a seamless process getting it implemented?
It was quite complicated working with IT to build the attribute, because the attribute workflow was really complex stuff, and it was also sort of started to overlap into COVID, so IT became very busy with sort of crisis managing that. So that was a bit tricky, but yeah, after a while we did. I'm really happy with how it came out and how user friendly it is.
And did you do any, I know we tried in the beginnings, but it would just be useful, I guess, for anyone watching, just to explain how we tested it. I know it was, we were using the test patient and basically mimicking journeys across the hospital as such, weren't we? And cannulas and changing their category to see that the icon changed colour.
Yeah, we did a lot of testing. So we use a radiology information system called CRIS, and that was the biggest where we had the biggest issues was the link between the radiology information system and Salus. So we had to run extensive testing on lots of different test patients to make sure that the radiology information system spoke appropriately to Salus and changed at the right time.
And then when you got it all worked out, which you have, and it's working well now, how did you then take that to the wards to let them know that this was ready and this is basically what we need of you now?
Yeah, so we worked with the comms team and we rolled out a screensaver to just keep it at the forefront of the ward's minds that we were focusing on ward readiness. It just also, you can see the screensaver on this slide, it really does explain exactly what was going on in CT. We also worked alongside the matrons and the ward clerks with the ward MDT at the ward MDTs. So they were able to feed back to all the teams on the ward that if they hover over the Salus attribute, it will tell them exactly what's happening.
I think the other thing we were thinking, and I know you've mentioned it before when we've caught up, was that you're just hoping that with the attribute as well, that it will give, when the patients are spoke about in the mornings, that maybe the ward MDTs, that it would just give a natural kind of pause to the CT readiness. Is that what you're hoping with this attribute as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think now we will go on to the findings just to see how much of an improvement you made. So yeah, so we're looking at really considerable improvements in patients having a meal, no cannula and no escort. Do you just want to say why you think that is? Do you think it's all dependent on the Salus icon, if there's anything else?
I think the Salus icon was instrumental in the no cannula improvements, because the feedback from the wards was that they didn't know when the CT was happening, so they didn't want to site a cannula and then the CT be not for a couple of days. The patient having a meal, I think we did do some separate work at MDTs with the nutrition nurses and with the head nurse about releasing patients. Historically, meal times have been protected, but it was identified this was really disruptive to diagnostic services. So if the patient had a red tray, so was a protected mealtime for real nutrition concerns, they weren't taken for CT, but everyone else was, because the risk of missing out on diagnostic imaging was identified to be more than a risk of missing a meal. Yeah, the no escort, we were apart from being able to tell the ward when the scan was roughly going to happen using the Salus attribute, if the wards were short for that entire 12-hour shift of escorts, it didn't change. Even if they knew that when the scan was happening that day, it doesn't magically create someone available to escort. So I think that's why the no escort hasn't been as big an improvement as things like the patients having a mealtime. But I think that's because that's not actually something CT can control.
I was just about to say that's probably a valuable learning asset then really throughout the project, in that things that you maybe initially foresee as within your control, as soon as you start getting into the real depths of the project, it's probably quite apparent that they're reliant on a lot more things than you initially thought.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I think the next stage would be just to talk about, well, leading on from that point, really, what you think your next steps may be from the project. And obviously you've had some really good improvements from here. So it's just probably just taking the time just to briefly explain how, you know, the 8-step methodology and the CATA methods that you used helped you with being able to achieve these improvements.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the 8-step first. It was a really good way of working because I am clinical the majority of the time, and I also have a team of 30 to look after, so I wasn't able to stick with this project for large chunks of time, and the 8-step meant that whenever I was able to pick up again, or something happened with the attribute or some part of it, I was able to go back and see exactly where I was and what my tasks were that I needed to be doing and how far I'd got. So it enabled me to like constantly reflect and review where I was in the process and keep on track of my my task.
And if you were to start, if you were to give a little bit of advice, I guess, to anybody who was going to take on a new project and use the 8-step method, if you like, what would be the one piece of advice you would give to anybody thinking about taking up that?
Yeah, definitely use it. It's really helpful. It's good to get like your peers to review it and to get input from other people, and 8 steps a really user-friendly way of showing what you're doing and where you're at, because it includes every step of the journey, from the process mapping at the beginning to your data collection to new data collection. So that was really helpful. The next steps, I think for me, would be rolling this out into other modalities within imaging. Through our service improvement huddles, it's been identified that IR have similar ward readiness problems, and that an attribute would be really helpful to them. We'd also really love for the wards to be able to feed back into our radiology system. So the SALAS attribute works both ways. That would help again in terms of ward readiness, giving us a feedback loop. But that was a lot more complicated for IT to build, but that is in the pipeline, hopefully.
Definitely. I think the other thing to add as well, which hopefully will come into a next step, is that we've now got the digital portering system in imaging as well. So I guess that your ward readiness project is just going to help that further, because, you know, if we've got faster porters moving around the hospital, hopefully that is instrumental and dependent on the wards being, you know, ready for those patients to be collected. Yeah,
absolutely. They both sort of work alongside each other in terms of improving the flow and also the capacity through the inpatient scanners. We don't want to see inpatient scanners sitting empty when you've got radiographers ready to scan, and both of those things are really important to that.
So I think I'll bring it to a close now, because I'm conscious of our time. But thanks for taking the opportunity to talk to me today, Kate. And I believe this is to be your practice coach certification. Obviously, we'll rely on the Quality Academy giving you your formal certificate. But I think from me within imaging, just feeding back that your improvements have been really positive. You've had a really structured approach to this all, and it's just a real well done from me as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been great to see the impact on our actually making a difference. It's been great.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for your time today, Kate.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Richard, just to let you know, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ryan. What I just said was really great and empowering. I'll try and repeat it. Just a big well done to Kate for her practice coach. That brings imaging probably one of the top scorers, 3 practice coaches in imaging now. So really well done. A huge thank you to Kerry and the team for doing the video and the recording. Really great idea. I'm sure there's a presenter's job, not that you want another job, Kerry, but I'm sure there's a presenter's job there going somewhere. Have a chat to Amanda. And also big congratulations to Christine and David. Support for the team, and also your CQC video. I thought it was really great for the trust to see. Lots and lots of improvement going on. So just a huge big thank you to the team. Kerry, Christine and David, really, really well done. There's lots of great stuff going on in Image at the moment. Stop now, Richard. Yeah, I got that. Sorry, just read what you said. Thank you. Right, I'd like to move on to our next presentation, which is over to Vicky.
Hi everybody, so my name's Vicky. I'm an improvement lead here with the Quality Academy, and I've been supporting hotel services, in particular the linen team, with an improvement. So the problem that they were facing from a patient's perspective is that we wanted to be confident that the patient has clean linen available each and every time they're requiring it, and ensuring that their stay within the hospital is comfortable as possible. And that also that the nursing team is available to spend their time on caring for the patient's needs, not looking for and ordering linen that they can't find. So as you can see from the condition that we were faced with, there were a high number of additional orders each day. So these orders are on top of the routine orders that the wards receive at night. And they could range anywhere from 6 to 25 additional orders per day, if not more. And for each of these orders, it would take, you're looking at around sort of 10 minutes or so just for nursing, a HCA or a staff nurse to identify that they require linen and then to order it. And then you have to think about the waiting time to receive this, or in the majority of cases, or in quite a few cases, the nursing team would identify a member of the ward staff to go down and collect that linen, because it's quite frankly much quicker, because otherwise you're waiting for a porter to be assigned that that job. And that, again, going down to collect the order can take anywhere sort of between 10 and 15 minutes to go and collect and get back to the ward. The storeroom down on level 2, which you can see from the photos, was very disorganised, very cluttered. There wasn't a clear flow, it wasn't set up for flow. There's no clear way of where you store things. And also another thing on top of this was each day the delivery that comes from our D&E at 12 o'clock, we would have to pull refuse porters, and again that's just to support with the unloading of the delivery, and this would take anywhere up to an hour a day out of the refuse porter's time. So next slide please, Bryony. So the target that we were looking at, thinking about the patient again, we wanted to make sure that we reduce the time that the ward staff are having to leave the ward to collect linen or spend their time on ordering linen. So we wanted to look towards a 10% improvement on this to allow those staff members to be able to spend their time patient facing. So looking at the problem and trying to look for countermeasures and opportunities to improve the service, we used tools such as the fishbone diagram and also 5 whys. So with the fishbone diagram, we were able to identify what the problems were, and using 5 whys, we were kind of able to dig down into the root cause to identify what we could potentially do to solve these barriers. Then if we go to the next slide, please, Bryony. So we put a plan in place to complete a couple of exercises. The first one was a 6S in the linen room, which Jamie, one of the linen porters, talked about in last month's report out. But we did this to improve the flow. So you can see from the 2 spaghetti diagrams on the slide in front of you that we managed to get from the first spaghetti diagram showing how they used to pack a single cage or a single order to the second one. And this, as you can see, has improved the flow. We've set the storeroom out, it's organised. And from the pictures above, you'll be able to see that there's set areas for all products, all of the inventory. There's markers on the wall for visual management to show levels and what belongs where. It's just made it much more efficient for the guys down there, which has means that they can utilize their time to be able to manage their stock that they keep down in the linen room more effectively, and meant that they can actually pack orders much more efficiently. Also, due to the change in the layout of the room, we were able to set it up that the refuse porters were no longer required to support with the receiving of the delivery from RD&E, which, as I said, it's saving up to an hour a day of refuse porter time. We've also put standard work up on the walls. So from the standard work on the walls, all staff members completely have, it's very visual for them to understand exactly what's required of them from their role, as well as training new staff. So they actually have a project search intern in down there now, and he's found this really beneficial because it's really clear. He's got pictures as well as flow charts to understand exactly what he needs to do and how he needs to do that. And then the second major improvement that we put in place was a 7-day delivery trial. So linen is typically delivered 6 days a week, but we did a 2-week trial looking at delivering that linen 7 days a week. And with implementing this, we had a 41% reduction of additional orders placed. So this was 186 orders in the weeks before, the 2 weeks before any improvement, down to just 108. And from these orders, we saw a massive reduction of 45% of those that were collected by ward staff, saving over 15 hours of nursing time with patients across the 2 weeks. So the impact, that's a huge impact on for our patients, which meant that, that's more time that they could, the nurses, the HCAs could be caring for them. And it's also increased the morale of the teams. I know specifically down in the linen room, this has really engaged the team to drive for future improvements. They're already coming up with ideas of what they want to do going forwards. But it's helped also reassure the wards that we can work together to be able to get linen available as and when they need it. And it's helped all the teams to feel very valued. So that's the improvement in a nutshell.
So Vicky, really, really well done. There's you see I've repeated Alan Martin's description of your 8-step as being a bit of a masterclass. So terrifically well done. That's getting praise from the national director at that level is certainly a compliment. One you need to make sure is written down somewhere. I think I saw a picture of you in the week wearing a hat called the 8-step Queen or A3 Queen. So
the Queen of A3, yes.
The Queen of A3. Very well done. Really great. I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And I think you mentioned it, but what's your thoughts about the impact you've had on the team in the linen store?
So it's just, I think they feel listened to, they feel valued, and it's really encouraged them to take this further. They really want to continue on this journey. They've got lots of ideas that are floating around. So they're in the process of implementing an improvement board so they can start driving their own improvements going forward.
Yeah, really well done. And I just want to say a big thank you to Kay, who's been your coach on this, but also Louise Pelly, who runs the area, and I know is supported the team also as well. It's done a really great job.
Yeah.
There was also some. I think I'm just going to make a commentary now. I discovered there was 2 ways of supplying wards while I was there when I had my go-see visit, which was cassette resupply, i.e. they take the entire stock up and just replace it and pull it away, which is kind of like replace the entire stock, walk away was not used, or top up. And is there any more work can be done on which is best?
So that's something that we've put forward to Louise and the team, and then they're going to be looking at working through their own improvement journey to look into the data and the benefits and the pros and cons of each of them, potentially moving to just one way of working.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I think the next slide is your certificate, and then we're on the ending slide. So congratulations, you're now a practice coach. Really well done. I know that Kay's got lots and lots of work lined up for you, which is also really inspiring, isn't it, Vicky? That's great.
Yeah.
So, so if we could just move on, so really well done. If we could move on to the next slide. Just a few reflections for me today. So although we've only had 4 presentations, I mean, what a breadth. From immunology lab processing to dosimetry, to imaging in patients, to the rudiments of linen stores in level 2, and real straightforward tools being used. It's all fantastic. And I think the common thread in there is teams driving the improvement, which is really, really great to see. So well done to have you presented, and we look forward to next month's being a bumper full edition. Unfortunately, it would appear that our guests from the north haven't managed to join us, but it's been great to have, I see Gary's been on the call, which is great to see Gary's joined, and a few others. So next report out is approximately in a month's time. Everyone is welcome. I think Anne might be encouraging a bit more attendance, as I will be, just to value the immense work that's going on. So well done to everyone that's there, who's gone through today, and really appreciate your help. We are early, but I think that's okay to finish early, unless there's any last questions in the chat.